sir. Okay, okay, okay. An- ଅଭିନନ୍ଦନ ଅନ୍ତର୍ଯାମୀ ସାର୍
କୁହନ୍ତୁ କୁହନ୍ତୁ ଶୁଭୁଛି।
ଆପଣ କରନ୍ତୁ ସାର୍ ଆଜି ଇଣ୍ଟ୍ରୋଡ୍ୟୁସ କରାଇ ଦିଅନ୍ତୁ नो प्रॉब्लम।
ହଉ ଠିକ୍ ଅଛି।
one second. Abhinandan sir, hello. Nice. Fine. Okay, Beriya sir, introduce ko.
Should we start? Hello.
यस सर यस सर।
Okay, okay,
Yes, yes sir. You can start.
okay. So, good afternoon, all of you, and welcome to Odisha State Open University live online class. Uh, as you know me very well since last 2 months, I am Dr. Antarami Beria, and today we have with us Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra. So you well acquainted with Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra. He is a teaching faculty in Department of Political Science in Sambalpur University, and today he will be speaking on a very relevant topic in the contemporary scenario in India. This is religious politics. You know, in India particularly, you must have seen since the partition of India, or the post independence of India, we can see how religious is a big factor, is a big element in our political process, in our political systems. So there is different low and ups, downs and ups in our politics because of religion or different aspect. So today, Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra will touch upon how religious politics is playing an important role, is playing a vital role in our political system, in our politics, in politics, in state politics, or in national politics as well. So I would request Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra to deliver his lecture, and we'll really happy and pleasure for all of us to having Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra, because he has he has done his research work, his PhD work, his MPhil work on religious politics in Odisha and in India. So I would request you, Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra, to deliver his lecture. Thank you, sir. Please go on, sir.
Thank you, Antaryami, and good afternoon to all of you. And this religious politics, it is part of the course India Democracy and Development. And including this talk, this will be my fourth talk on this particular course, India Democracy and Development. And while giving a talk on ethnicity and nation state, one of the questions that was asked to me was that how religion plays an important role in Indian politics or constitution. Today, perhaps while going through the religious politics in India, maybe we will find the answer of that question. So, what is this religious politics? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are very
Am,
much audible.
okay,
Yes.
Yes, sir.
okay, okay. Thank you. What is this religious politics? Right. So, religious politics is one kind of identity politics. Religion is one kind of ethnicity, right? So this religious politics, in religious politics, you will find that there are two terms: religion and politics, right? Uh, these two terms are quite, they are distinct concept, and there is a difference. Why it is distinct? Because religion has its meaning, nature, and scope. Politics has also its meaning, nature, and scope. And if you go to the Western society, then you will find that they understand secularism as a kind of separation between the religion and the politics, right? But in Indian context, We understand secularism not what Western people they understand it. We don't believe in or we cannot practice that separation of religion and politics as a mode of secularism in India, rather than due to intercaste domination, intercaste domination, interreligious domination, and intra-religious domination. Our secularism cannot be based on separation between the religion and the politics. But in India, you will find that there is a synthetic existence of religion and politics in the traditional society, and it is still continuing in different forms, right? And when I'm saying India's traditional society, one can understand that our traditional society is a kind of Hindustani society, and in a Hindustani society, you will find there is coexistence of Hindu and Islam, Muslim culture, right? And if you visit any Hindu king, any Hindu Raja, or any Muslim king, then you will find that there is a Pandit in the darbar of Hindu Raja, and there is a Maulavi, right, in the darbar of Muslim Raja. Uh, who are these Pandits, or who are these Maulavis, right? They represent the kind of religion, right? But in Indian context, the understanding of religion is quite different from to its counterpart in the West, right? In Indian context, religion basically means that righteousness, right? जोंटा हमें कहो कि धर्म संगत. It's not understood as a organized religion the way it is understood in the West, right? So if you see the darbar of Hindu Raja or the Muslim Raja, then you will find that generally the lawmakers are these Pandit and Maulavis, right? मौला माना जो माने रहंती से दरबार रे, right? मुस्लिम पंडित जो माने जोंटी तांकर इस्लाम रे जो तांकर अछि सेटा कोन मस्जिद रे जो माने पूजा करन, राइट? तो से पंडित और मौला ए दुई जन जाक आई मीन they know what is right and what is wrong, right? They actually make the rules, regulation, laws, right? So it is the king which execute that laws, right? So there is a deeper connection between this religion and the state. State represents the king, and religion represents that pandit and mullahs, right? Even today also, that in the traditional society you will find a typical relationship between the in religion and politics between the pandit and the raja, right? गोटे किंगडम को दरकार गोटे राजा भी दरकार गोटे पंडित भी दरकार, right? Even today also religion is also playing a greater role in to the politics, right? And why there is a deep connection between the religion and the politics? What is that interlocker? The interlocker is the social process, right? So it is the religion, especially in Indian context, it is the religion that shape the psyche of individual, our social behavior, our social thinking, and entire social process of Indian society is guided by the religion, right? So I may be publicly I may be irreligious, but privately I'm a religious fellow. We can take the example of Jawaharlal Nehru. He's publicly he doesn't show that he's a religious person, he's a secular person, but privately he's a religious person. So it's not necessarily true that we are always guided by our public status. We are also guided by our private understanding or private status also, right? So it is the social process that is shaped by the religion, and that social process plays a very important or key role in the politics. So religion is a significant factor of mass mobilization, right? And religion religion needs politics and politics needs religion, right? So it is the religion, that is the key of mobilization, and politics is all about the mobilization, right? So politics, if there is no religion, right, then in Indian context, the politics may face huge problem. Actually, in politics, religion is its, if politics is English, then religion is its grammar. Then religion is its grammar. So religion needs politics and politics needs religion. Why religion needs politics? Religion needs politics. Here politics represents, as I said, king, and religion represents either the prescription or the practice, right? So almost all the prescription of different religion, that is not bad actually, that is very good. But so far as the practice of religion is concerned, we can see that there is a difference between the theory and practice, right? So sometimes our practice of that religion, we become very much discriminatory, we become very much violent, right? In that situation, politics is necessary. In that situation, the intervention of state is necessary. That way, in India, we have the intra-caste domination. Within a caste, there is one group of subcaste is having domination over the another subcaste, right? And there is a intercaste domination. One caste is dominating over other caste. There is inter-religious domination. One religion is dominating over other religion. ଯେମିତି ନେଇପାରିବା Hinduism, I mean Islam, right, or Christianity. Both these religions, they feel that as if Hinduism is dominating over them. There is intra-religious domination also. Intra-religious domination means within a religion there is also a kind of domination, right? Within the Hinduism, one caste is dominating over other caste, right? So when all these different kinds of dominations are there, then the state cannot be agnostic. I mean, the state has to intervene and state has to resolve the problem. So in that sense, religion needs politics and politics needs religion. Why politics needs religion? It's all about religion. Here, in this context, religion means that I mean, righteousness, right? I mean, there are, in a Gandhian sense, try to understand that Gandhi says that religion and politics are inseparable. So what does that religion stands for? I mean, their religion means a kind of righteousness, a kind of dharma. It's not adharma, right? So from that angle, politics needs guidance, and that guidance is available with the religion and its prescription, right? So what is the meaning and significance of religious politics? The meaning of religious politics can be in twofold, right? So the two kinds or two meaning of religious politics. The first one is that in a situation where religion is the basis of political articulation or defining the purpose of politics. For example, reinterpretation of religious tradition for defining the nationalism. So the first understanding of religious politics is that religion is a basis of political articulation or defining the purpose of politics. And religion define କରୁଛୁ politics ଟା କ'ଣ, right? For example କ'ଣ now we have different religious tradition and we are reinterpreting those religious tradition for defining what is nationalism. Why this reinterpretation is necessary? The reinterpretation of different religious tradition is necessary to know or to get a kind of self introspection that they are intrinsically good. They are intrinsically good. So जो intrinsically गोटे goodness or good sense रही तो सही सेंस को सही सेंस को रियलाइज करबा पाई there is a need of reinterpretation of religious tradition. And once all the religious tradition, I'm talking in the context of India, once all the religious tradition they get that good sense, that the intrinsic merit within themselves, then a better kind of nationalism will be produced. Now, what this nationalism stands for? This nationalism, stands as politics, right? And reinterpretation of religious tradition, it represents the religion. So the religion, can guide, or the religion can define the purpose of politics. That is one understanding of religious politics, right? ताको आमे कहि परिबा आमे जोंटा को जदि आमे आ गोटे टर्म ताको यूज करि परिबा दैट इज कॉल्ड द secularization means what? That there is an element of secularism within our religious tradition, and we need to rediscover secularism within the tradition and try to implement that, so that secularism can be a way of life for us. Jemte democracy re koche, democracy is not a form of government, democracy is a way of life. Semti bhi secularism ko till we are not realizing it as a way of our life, then Indian secular state will face failure always, right? So basically, the first understanding of religious politics talks about the secularization or understanding secularism within the religious tradition, and once you understand the secular values within the religious tradition, there I think you can develop a better kind of nation state, a better kind of nationalism. There is a different, there is another understanding of religious politics. In that understanding, religion is used as the foundation for political mobilization. I mean, केमिति होची ना to use temple, mosque, Ganesh puja for political mobilization, right? जेमति कि महाराष्ट्र रे they celebrate Ganesh puja, and they make it, it's a public festival, right? And the purpose of this Ganesh puja is nothing but to get a kind of mobilization, a kind of Hindu togetherness, right? It's a feeling that or it gives us a feeling that we belong to that culture, right? We are not different, we are one, right? So you can see these two understanding of religious politics. The first one we can says that this is the religion is defining the purpose of politics, and the second one, religion is used as the foundation of political mobilization. So এই দুইটা understanding रो मते first लाଗୁची कि religious politics is all about secularism first, जोंठी secularization ऊपर बेसी गुरुत्व दिया जाउची, and the second रे जेतेबेले आमे कहूचे कि religion is used as a foundation for political mobilization, then perhaps we understand it is communal politics or communalism. Then religious politics रो दुईटा aspect रहउची. Religious politics talks about secularism, and religious politics talks about communalism also, right? The concept religious politics introspect the normative relation between the religion and politics. Therefore, it involves the question of secularism. But then the question is how one is oriented to secularism. Now, the secularism katha astuchi Indian context re, there is a lot of confusion, right? It's very difficult to in Indian context to understand who is secular and who is not, right? It depends on what is your orientation, how you perceive, how you feel, and how you evaluate, right? That depends on that. So the orientation to secularism depends on various presence of religion and politics. from society to society and from time to time, right? So I mean, what is secularism? Can we have a monolithic idea or monolithic understanding of secularism? No, not at all. I mean, secularism, it is also, it is subjected to change, right? In terms of different society, you will find there are different and different notion of secularism. Even within the India also, the understanding of secularism, it differs from time to time. For example, in India, the first 30 years after the independence, the relation between the religion and politics in this period was different from today's relationship between the religion and politics. ତେଣୁ ଆମେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଫାଷ୍ଟ 30 years କଥା କହୁଛେ, what does it mean? We are talking about, Nehruvian period. ତେଣୁ Nehruvian period ରେ secularism ଯାହା ଥିଲା ବା ବା communalism ଯାହା ଥିଲା, right? Theoretically secularism କହିପାରିବ, when we are dealing with the idea, and when we are dealing with the practice, then we can call it, communalism, right? So Nehru period रे secularism বা communalism ର ମାନେ ଯାହା ଥିଲା, ଆଜି ମୋଦି period ରେ secularism ଆଉ communalism ର ମାନେ ଅଲଗା. Let's spend some time. କଣ ଥିଲା, what is the nature of secularism in the Nehru period, and what is the nature of secularism today, right? Here I think I have read the critique of constitutional secularism, an article written by Professor Patnaik, Arun Kumar Patnaik. I think that article is a very brilliant article, and while I was in PhD, I was doing my PhD in JNU. We are having regular talk, and I used to, even till now also, I used to tell, sir, that article is a very fundamental article, and that article can produce near about 7 to 8 theses, PhD thesis, if one will work on that article. And that article, gives a serious challenge to the left liberal understanding of secularism. So if you go through that article, then you can find there is a clear distinction between the Nehruvian secularism and the secularism in the BJP regime, right? But the article केमती लिखा है ना, crisis of Indian secularism. Secularism रो कौन crisis अछि? In that article, I mean, Patnaik sir has given a kind of introspection to the Congress way of secularism, and it has also given a kind of introspection to the BJP way of secularism. So in that article, you can find that the Nehruvian secularism, you may not find the concept of mass mobilization, right? So the political forces, who is the political forces? Now it is Nehru, Ambedkar, or Sardar Patel. They were the political forces in the past 30 years of post independence, right? You will find that their secularism was not kind of, that there was no Indianness in their conception of secularism, because that secularism was very much hegemonic, and that secularism was very much Eurocentric. And hence the secularism, Nehru tries to impose on the Indian society, people were not familiar with that secularism. Hence that secularism was not having the mass mobilization character attached to it, right? That is the first aspect of the Nehruvian mode of secularism. And the second feature of Nehruvian mode of secularism was that it was based on anti-communal plank without criticizing its own secular politics. I mean, Nehru, Ambedkar. If you read that article, then you will find that Nehru, Ambedkar, they knew what is the problem, but they were not addressing those problems. And as if their secularism was nothing but it was just a anti-communal plank, right? It's just attacking the communalism is actually the secularism, right? That is the second feature of Nehruvian mode of secularism, right? And in that article also you can find that the major problem with the Nehruvian secularism was that there was no provision for Christian Dalit and Muslim Dalit, as if Nehruvian secularism is based on the notion that caste uh, is not religious religion neutral, right? Caste is not religion neutral. Only caste is there within the Hinduism. But if you read the autobiography of Ambedkar, right? If you read the autobiography of Ambedkar, then you will find that Ambedkar he very well realized that caste is also there in non-Hindu religion, right? Even Nehru knew it very well, but still then these stalwarts, they were silent about the existence of Christian and Muslim Dalit. And second, no, not second actually, the fourth, right? And Nehruvian secularism, it was also silent about the national law on the reasonable restriction or right to propagation. If you read the article right to propagation, then you will find that the state can make certain restriction to the right to propagation. And this right to propagation, if you go through the Constituent Assembly debate, then you will find that the Hindu lobby was against it. There was strong Christian lobby, and at the end, because India is a secular state, and they think that and Christian lobby, se kaun kahutila na it is the basic tenet of our religion, and that's why the right to propagation was there. But the fear of right to propagation was also there, and the fear was that Hinduism is a non-proselytizing religion, and Islam and Christianity are the proselytizing religion, and maybe there will be aggressive campaign of religious conversion. That's why a clause was added that the state can make a reasonable law on reasonable restriction on right to propagation. But Nehru did not do anything, right? So you can see in the Nehruvian secularism, the state was silent about the caste in the Islam and Christianity. And if you move to the Modi era, you can also a continuity. BJP is also afraid of recognizing the Dalit Muslim and Dalit Christian. But the reason for BJP is quite interesting. I mean, because BJP think that for BJP reservation is the inducement of non-conversion, right? Reservation is the inducement of non-conversion. The moment you give reservation to the Dalit, in the Christian Dalit, or Dalit Christian and Dalit Muslim, then there will be huge conversion to that religion. So it is actually the reservation within the religion that has acted that has acted as a obstacle before the conversion. So you can find a kind of politics or opportunism, politics of reservation in this context, right? So one can also move on. There are many things in that article, but let me back to the track. So in India, the first 30 years after the independence, the relation between the religion and politics, or ଆମେ secularism କହିପାରିବା, ତାକୁ ଆମେ communalism କହିପାରିବା, in this period was different from today's relation between the religion and politics. ताମାନେ secularism ଯାହା ଥିଲା ଆଗରୁ ସେ ଧୀରେ ଧୀରେ gradually nothing is certain, everything is uncertain, right? ସବୁ change ହେଇ ଚାଲୁଛି. So religious politics in practice is also known as the communal politics, as I said earlier. So mere appeal to religion does not necessarily lead to religious politics. For example, Gandhi and Savarkar both believed that religion should inform politics, but their version of what it means to be Hindu were so different that it gave rise to two very different conception of politics, right? For Gandhi, Gandhi views, Gandhi's views was that Gandhi's views was that should spiritual values should influence politics. Otherwise, politics would be impoverished, right? And politics for Gandhi was a coalition of emancipatory faith. Hence, religion and politics are inclusive in nature, right? So for Gandhi, Hinduism was a source of spiritual value, spiritualism. So Hinduism was not or is not a organized religion for Gandhi, right? And Gandhi has derived the great deal of spiritual values from Hinduism, but he is not limited to it. He also accepts that Islam and Christianity is also the source of spiritual values. So this is Gandhi, right? And what about the Savarkar? Now Savarkar, instead of spiritualism, he understood race, ancestry, history, tradition, and sacredness of the land, which should be the basis of Hindu view of politics. Muslim and Christianity in India cannot treat India as their punya bhumi. His concept of Hindutva politics is a exclusivist politics, right? Exclusivist politics. So for Gandhi and Savarkar, the understanding of Hinduism differs. For Gandhi, Hinduism is all about spiritual values, and for Savarkar, Hinduism is all about race. Hinduism is all about ancestry. Hinduism is all about history, tradition, sacredness, and the politics based on such kind of understanding of Hindu religion is a exclusivist politics, right? In context of Gandhi, that politics was a inclusive politics. So for Savarkar, whose religion has not has its origin in India, whose religion has its origin in India, can subscribe to these views of politics. I mean, if you want to, or if you are a nationalist, then you have to accept that you or your origin, or you belong your origin to this punya bhumi. So the Gandhi way of politics and the Savarkar way of politics is quite different, though they both are guided by Hindu religion. So understanding of Hinduism differs. Now let's come to the evolution of religious politics in India. In the last decade of 19th century, politics based on revivalist sentiments started all over the country, especially in Bengal and Maharashtra. And these Bengal and Maharashtra, these two are the main centers for social reform movement, right? So politics based on revivalism replaced the social movement which sought to question certain practices within the Hinduism like child marriage, enforced widowhood, denial education to women. ତା ମାନେ କଣ ନା ଆମର ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଜିମ୍ ଆସିବା ପୂର୍ବରୁ, ସ୍ପେଶାଲି ରାଜା ରାମମୋହନ ରାୟ ଆସିବା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରକାରର ସୋସିଆଲ ମୁଭମେଣ୍ଟ ବା ସିଭିଲାଇଜିଂ ମିଶନ ବ୍ରିଟିଶର ମାନେ ଷ୍ଟାର୍ଟ କରିଥିଲେ। ପ୍ରଥମେ ବ୍ରିଟିଶର ମାନେ ଆମର ଯେଉଁ ଚାଇଲ୍ଡ ମ୍ୟାରେଜ ଆକୁ ବିରୋଧ କରୁଥିଲେ, ଆମର ଯେଉଁ ୱିଡୋ ସତୀଦାହ ପ୍ରଥା ତାକୁ ଇଏ କରୁଥିଲେ, ବିରୋଧ କରୁଥିଲେ, ଓମେନ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଯେଉଁ ଏଜୁକେସନ ଦିଆଯାଉନଥିଲା ତାକୁ ବି ସେମାନେ ବିରୋଧ କରୁଥିଲେ, ରାଇଟ? These were the social movements that was part of the civilizing mission of the Britisher. But after this, revivalism, revivalist sentiment, it grew, it replaced that civilizing mission, right? So when this, revivalist sentiment grew, an argument was also simultaneously, developed. And what was that argument? That argument was that foreign rulers and Britishers have no right to interfere in the religious customs of Hindu. However, I mean, से argument टा कौन थिला ना एमाने चाहूतले सब जिनस गुडा चेंज हो, राइट? बट गोटे आर्गुमेंट डेवलप है कौन कि ये जो रिवाइवलिस्ट सेंटिमेंट बा रिवाइवलिस्ट जो थॉट अंडरस्टैंडिंग एटा सब से सिविलाइजिंग मिशन रु ही आसी ब्रिटिशर मान जो सिविलाइजिंग मिशन रही तेणु से क्रिटिसाइज कले दे कौन ना जदि फॉरेन रूलर्स बा ब्रिटिशर जदि तांकु ए क्षेत्र में रिवाइवलिस्ट मूवमेंट साहाय्य करिवो then India will lose its Indianness. Hence, Britishers have no right to interfere in the religion and customs of Hindu. Especially, आमे हिंदू के ठीक इंडिया ये रे भी आमे व्यवहार करी परिवा. The India रो जो custom rules regulation अच्छी बा convention अच्छी ताकू ब्रिटिशर माने तांकर अधिकार नहीं सेटर को से intervene करिवे. However, the argument sounds false because it was never made clear whether an infant marriage of a girl was an integral feature of Hindu custom or merely a social practice prevailing in the then Indian society. But ये जो काउंटर टा करा गला गोटे आर्गुमेंट दिया गला ये आर्गुमेंट टा गोटे फॉल्सिफाइड आर्गुमेंट भलिया प्रतीत हैला कहीं ना जो माने ये आर्गुमेंट करथिले से माने ए प्रश्न रो उत्तर दे पारलेनी. प्रश्न कौन ना हमर जो बाल्य विवाह प्रथा होतला ए बाल्य विवाह प्रथाटा केवल गोटे इट वाज ए सोशल प्रैक्टिस ना एटा हमर हिंदू रिलीजन लो गोटे प्रेस्क्रिप्शन थिला. वाज इट ए प्रैक्टिस और वाज इट ए प्रेस्क्रिप्शन? If it is a practice, then the revivalism or revivalist sentiment or the British civilizing mission, they are not interfering in a religion. They are just interfering in your practice, not your religion. There is a difference between, or practice is one part of the religion, but practice is also guided by certain kind of social convention. The religion may not prescribe to it, right? So this rising Hindu revivalism got support from unexpected quarter. बहुत उड़ा क्वार्टर रु हिंदू रिवाइवलिज्म को सपोर्ट भी मिली थिला. However, here Vivekananda gave an interesting argument based on reform versus growth and services. Vivekananda गोटे बढ़िया कथाटे एटी कहिसंती ना he declared that I quote and unquote I do not believe in reform. Vivekananda is saying I do not believe in reform. I believe in growth. I don't dare to put myself in the position of God and dictate unto our society. This way you should or you shall move and not that way. मु भगवान नुह मु भगवान का आसन ले बसिकी कहि परिबिनी कि तमे एई रास्ता रे तमे मूव कर जाओ सेई रास्ता रे नुह. This wonderful national machine, especially is talking about India, has worked through ages. This wonderful national river is flowing before us. आमे आसीबा पूर्वरु भी I देश अच्छी प्रकृति अच्छी. Who knows and dare to say whether it is good or how it shall move. किए जानी ची what is the right way, what is the right way of reform, what is the correct way of reform, right? So that is the understanding of Vivekananda. So Vivekananda considered the social reform movement as elitist and alien to the Indian tradition, right? Vivekananda kahin ki pratham ru se kahitele ki I don't believe in reform, because for Vivekananda every reform is elitist in nature and reform is alien to masses, to Indian tradition, right? Indian tradition aguru emti konosi reform ko experience kari nahi. So along with Vivekananda, the Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, he has also expressed the similar view. Then Bal Gangadhar Tilak, he in fact raised a banner of revolt against the social reform, right? So all these figures were very prominent nationalist voice, and their effort was also to give a new and different shape to Indian nationalism. So actually से माने reform against रे भी नथिले, but तांका भितर उटे डर थिला कि आमे जदि रिफॉर्म को सपोर्ट करिबा मे बी आमे ब्रिटिशर रो सिविलाइजिंग मिशन द्वारा गाइडेड हे जिवा अनकॉन्शियसली सेथि पई से माने सदाबळे इंडियन नेस को भी रेस्पेक्ट दउतिले दैट रिफॉर्म जोंठी our experience will guide us. The European experience of West will not guide us. Our own experience, our own wisdom will guide us, and on that basis, we will make certain reforms, right? So their main purpose was ସେମାନେ କାହିଁକି रिफॉर्म को टिके क्रिटिकली देखुतले एज ए क्रिटिक है कि रिफॉर्म को से परसीव कहीं करुले ना तांकर गोटे दायित्व थिला से दायित्व कौन ना टू सेव द इंडियन नेशनलिज्म now if there is no indianness to india then how can that indian nationalism can be built up, right? So religious politics establish its claims in fighting the legacy of ram mohan roy in the direction of establishing the importance of Indian tradition and Hindu custom. तेणु Vivekananda, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, they are not against Ramon Rai, but Ramon Rai जोंटा को start करी थिले तो सी सहीटा को आउ टिके आगो को नहीं गले and by giving emphasize the importance of Indian tradition and Hindu custom. So as I said earlier that Bengal and Maharashtra, these were the two centers of social reform movement, right? So let us spend some time on these two states and how what was the nature of that social reform movement in Bengal and what was the nature of social reform movement in the Maharashtra. So आमे प्रथमे बेंगल टे डील करिवा. Hindu revivalism emerged in Bengal in the form of intellectualized revivalism. The tone and the drift was such that it may have little appeal to the common people. It had three major drives, right? तेणु बेंगल बेंगल जो आसला आमर हिंदू हिंदू रिवाइवलिज्म हेतिला दैट रिवाइवलिज्म सेटा एते it has no mass character rather than it was in the form of intellectualized revivalism. तो बेंगल जो हिंदू रिवाइवलिज्म हेतिला तार तीनटा एस्पेक्ट अछि कोन फर्स्ट एस्पेक्ट कोन ना it highlights and glorify the immemorial tradition of India, establishing spiritual superiority to the West. Right? तो सेतबेले कौन हैला ना बेंगल जो माने नेशनलिस्ट लीडर थिले से माने तांको लेखा रे they try to highlight, they try to glorify the Indian tradition and they try to show that India is spiritually superior to the West and West has to learn from India. Ita gote drive. Second is that they also ask question who is an Indian. They also ask question who is an Indian, right? Everybody who lives in India is not an Indian. So that they define that everybody who lives in India are not Indian. To be Indian, territoriality does not help. Right? केवल इंडिया रे रही गले के इंडियन हेवेनी. Rather, he or she should inhabit certain attribute and express certain sentiment. Though the word cultural nationalism was not coined at that time, but it was first step towards it. तेणु आमर जो बीजेपी आसला परे जो गोटे कल्चरल नेशनलिज्म जो कॉन्सेप्ट आसला सेतबेले कॉन्सेप्ट डेवलप हेई नथिला किंतु प्राय सेमाने जोंटा माने चाहूतले कहबा पई कि टेरिटोरियलिटी इज नॉट द इंडिकेटर ऑफ योर ऑफ योर nationality, right? Of your Indianness. To be a Indian, you have to have a certain kind of attitude. you have to have certain kind of sentiments, and cultural nationalism speaks about that, right? But cultural nationalism as a term, it was not coined at that time. And the third drive of Bengal Hindu revivalism was that immense intellectual labor went into showing the superiority of Lord Krishna to Jesus Christ as an indicator of patriotic Indian, right? ତ ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରକାରର କମ୍ପାରିଜନ ଆଣିଲେ ଏଠି ହିନ୍ଦୁ ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଜିମ୍ ମିନ୍ସ ହ୍ୱାଟ the Hindu, ଗୋଟେ Hinduism, reform ହଉଛି, Hinduism awaken ହଉଛି, Hinduism is getting a identity, a broader political base, that is Hindu revivalism, right? ତ ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରକାରର comparison କଲେ କଣ କି Lord Krishna Christ ଠାରୁ our Krishna is superior to the Christ. Sanatan Hindu Dharma, it is the oldest, and every religion they come from the Sanatan Dharma. So କେତେବେଳେ Krishna superior ହେବେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ସେ ଆଦି ମାନେ ବହୁତ ପୁରୁଣାରୁ ସେ ରହିଥିବେ, ଯେଉଁ ରିଲିଜନଟା ପୁରୁଣାରୁ ଅଛି, ତ ସେଇ ରିଲିଜନର ଯିଏ ହେଡ୍ ସେ ହିଁ ସବୁଠାରୁ ବଡ଼, ସେଇ ଅନୁସାରେ ସିଏ ସେଇଟାକୁ ୟୁନୋ ଆମର ବେଙ୍ଗଲର ଯୋଉ ଇଣ୍ଟେଲେକ୍ଚୁଆଲିଷ୍ଟ ରିଭାଇଭାଲ ଥିଙ୍କର୍ସ ଯୋଉମାନେ ଥିଲେ, ତ ସେମାନେ ଏଇ ସୁପିରିୟରିଟିକୁ ଆଣିବା ପାଇଁ ବି ବହୁତ ଚେଷ୍ଟା କଲେ ତାଙ୍କ ଲେଖା ମାଧ୍ୟମରେ. Especially if you go to the Kandhamal also, some of the Christian, Catholic and Protestant, and they speak to tribal that our Jesus Christ is superior to your God. He can give you the salvation. He can solve your everyday problem. So such kind of methodology, it is also still there, right? Kandhamal भी सेटा pastor माने सेटा generally कहिथांती, and some of the conversion in Kandhamal, that is also based on such kind of interpretation, right? In the Maharashtra, this Hindu revivalism took the form of Brahminical reassertion. This can be seen as an effort to counter the awakening and assertion among the lower caste led by Jyotiba Phule. Right? The religious symbol and the festivals were activated in the public area to effect the mobilization of masses in the cause of nationalism. The most well known of these is the is a celebration of Ganesh Puja, a domestic event, into public celebration of Ganesh Utsav, right? So puja, there is a difference between the puja and utsav. Puja, you can have it. Puja is very much individualistic in nature. I can make my puja, but they converted Ganesh puja into Ganesh utsav. In utsav, it's social in nature. Utsav, right? So ମହାରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରରେ ଯେଉଁ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଜିମ୍ ହେଲା, ଆମର ଜ୍ୟୋତିବା ଫୁଲେ ସେ ଲୋୟର କାଷ୍ଟ ମାନଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ ଯେଉଁ ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରକାର ଏସୋସିଏସନ ଆଣିଥିଲେ, ତାକୁ ଚ୍ୟାଲେଞ୍ଜ କରିକି ହିନ୍ଦୁ ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଜିମଟା ଷ୍ଟାର୍ଟ ହେଲା, ରାଇଟ୍? ଆଉ ଏଇ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଜିମରେ କ'ଣ ହେଲା ନା ରିଲିଜିୟସ୍ ସିମ୍ବଲ୍ସ ଆଉ ଫେଷ୍ଟିଭାଲ୍ସ ଗୁଡାକୁ ବି ଇସ୍ତେମାଲ ବ୍ୟବହାର କରାଗଲା. ଫର ଏକ୍ସାମ୍ପଲ ନିଆଯାଇଛି ନା ଗଣେଶ ପୂଜାକୁ ଗୋଟେ ଗଣେଶ ଉତ୍ସବ କରାଗଲା. ଗଣେଶ ଉତ୍ସବ କରିବା ପରେ ଗୋଟେ ମୋବିଲାଇଜେସନ ଆସିଲା, ହିନ୍ଦୁ ମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ଗୋଟେ ଏସୋସିଏସନ ଆସିଲା, right? So today this utsav in different parts of India is interpreted as a source of communal tension utilized by the Sangha Parivar. ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଯେଉଁମାନେ ଲେଫ୍ଟ ଲିବରାଲ ସେକୁଲାର ଇଣ୍ଟେଲେକ୍ଚୁଆଲ ଅଛନ୍ତି, ସେମାନେ ଏଇ ଗଣେଶ ଉତ୍ସବକୁ କହନ୍ତି ଦିସ୍ ଇଜ Sangha Parivar is playing a communal politics through this Ganesh Utsav, right? Then the third form of the Hindu revivalism is that it took the third form it took was the building of the cult of Shivaji Maharaj, right? third aspect of Hindu revivalism in Maharashtra, सेटा कौन हैला ना they utilize they used the cult of Shivaji Maharaj. समय शिवाजी को स्टेच्यू कले कहीं ना Shivaji Maharaj, he was a concrete historical figure. He was a great warrior and always fighting the Muslim rule as an awakening and communalized mass consciousness. तेणु शिवाजी गणेश उत्सव को तो व्यवहार करागला, इवन शिवाजी को भी गोटे प्रकार आइकन रूप में व्यवहार करागला, गोटे प्रकार awakening within the Hindu consciousness रो गोटे awaken आनिबा पाई शिवाजी महाराज को भी यूज करागला. The emerging political temper based on religious revivalism and cultural nationalism with the writing of Vivekananda Aravinda started giving spiritual teaching to the materially oriented West to enrich their तो आमर बेंगल इंटेलेक्चुअल थ्रू राइटिंग आ महाराष्ट्र रे गोटे प्रकार जो एक्टिविज्म स्टार्ट हैला इन कनेक्शन टू हिंदू रिवाइवलिज्म, सेटर केवल गोटे उद्देश्य थिला. से उद्देश्य कौन ना टू बिल्ड अप ए कल्चरल नेशनलिज्म, राइट. एंड एट दैट टाइम on cultural nationalism, both Vivekananda and Aravinda, they wrote extensively and through their writing, they try to give a spiritual teaching to the materially to the West who is materially oriented, right. तो तांको कौन कहा गला ना materially you are rich but spiritually you are very poor. So it's not that we will learn material things from you. You can or you should also learn certain spiritual aspect from us also, right. And within this mission they invoked the glories of ancient India, the glory of ancient India, then incomparable nature of Indian toleration and so on, right. तो से जो कल्चरल नेशनलिज्म ऊपर जो विवेकानंद और अरविंद एक्सटेंसिवली लेखा लेखी कले, तो सेट्री से कौन कले ना इंडियन ट्रेडिशन, इंडियन टॉलरेंस, इंडियन रिलीजन, इंडियन फिलॉसफी आकु से माने ग्लोरीफाई करबा आरंभ कले. So one may find the comparison between the Hindu Vedantic tradition with other religion in Vivekananda philosophy. In fact, he compared in his work, Collected Work Volume 1, Vivekanand, with Hindu tolerance, compared Hindu tolerance with Muslim intolerance, right. तो Collected Work Volume 1 ले विवेकानंद हिंदू टॉलरेंस और मुस्लिम इनटॉलरेंस भितरे गोटे कंपैरिजन आनी चंती, राइट. एंड ही equated Mohammedanism with the slaughter all over the world, and consider the prophet of Islam as having more harm to the world than good. It's a very radical position Vivekananda has took, right. So in nutshell, these observation, बहुत गुड़ा रिवाइवलिस्ट थिंकर, राइट. तो से माने एते हिंदू कल्चर, हिंदू ट्रेडिशन को एते ग्लोरीफाई करिसंती, से ग्लोरिफिकेशन कौन करिछि ना द ऑब्जर्वेशन बिकेम द वेरी डैमेजिंग फॉर इंटर कम्युनिटी रिलेशनशिप. केवल गांधी को बाद दे देले, गांधी को बाद दे दी सारा परे आउ जेतिकी भी रिवाइवलिस्ट थिंकर अछंती, तो से माने ग्लोरिफिकेशन ले गोटे कथा भूली जाइछंती कि वंस you are glorifying one religion, then you are also causing a psychological harm to other religion, जोंटा गांधी बहुत विरोध करुछले. So in nutshell, these observation became very damaging for inter community relationship and having disastrous consequences when seen in conjunction with what shall be happening, what was happening with the Muslim, right? ତେଣୁ you know ଯେତେବେଳେ ତୁମେ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଜିମ୍ କଥା କହୁଛ, ଯେତେବେଳେ ତୁମେ glorification କଥା କହୁଛ, glorifying the Hinduness or Hinduism, then you are also making Musalman or Muslim as a second class citizen to India. But there is also a logic. There is also a logic why Hindu revivalists, they glorify the Hindu tradition, Hindu culture, and let me say it. So the development of Hinduism or the muscle to Hinduism was felt. Muscle to Hinduism माने कौन? Hinduism को टिके strong करागला बा Hinduism रो development, Hinduism रो glorification करागला. कहीं कि ना it was felt by all the religious thinker in the wave of revivalism except Gandhi, that Hinduism was weak and therefore it was first conquered by the Muslim, then it was colonized by the Britisher, and therefore it must be it must be masculinized, or it must be uh, developed, or it must be developed, or it must be glorified, right? So this view united thinkers like Bankim Chandra, Vivekananda, Dayananda Saraswati, ତାଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ବି ବହୁତ ଡିଫରେନ୍ସ ଅଛି, ବଟ୍ ଏଇ ଯୋଉ ଚିନ୍ତା କଣ ନା ହିନ୍ଦୁଇଜିମ୍ ୱିକ୍ ଅଛି, ହିନ୍ଦୁଇଜିମ୍ କୁ ମୁସଲମାନ ମାନେ କଙ୍କର କରିଛନ୍ତି ହିନ୍ଦୁସ୍ତାନ କୁ ଯୋଉଟା ଥିଲା, ଆଉ ଆକୁ ବ୍ରିଟିଶର ମାନେ ବି ଆକୁ colonized କରିଛନ୍ତି, ସେଥିପାଇଁ Hinduism Hinduism must be masculinized, and Hinduism must be developed or revived, and এই আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিংটা বঙ্কিমচন্দ্র চ্যাটার্জি, দেন বিবেকানন্দ, স্বামী দয়ানন্দ ସରସ୍ୱତୀ, ଅରବିନ୍ଦ ଆଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରକାରର ୟୁନିଟି ଆଣିଛି. The unity and integrity of India was conceived in the unity and masculinity of Hindu, right? So ତାଙ୍କର ଅଣ୍ଡରଷ୍ଟାଣ୍ଡିଂ କ'ଣ ଅଛି, ଯଦି ହିନ୍ଦୁ ଷ୍ଟ୍ରଙ୍ଗ ନ ହବ ତେବେ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ ବି ଷ୍ଟ୍ରଙ୍ଗ ହେଇପାରିବ ନାହିଁ. ଯଦି ହିନ୍ଦୁଇଜିମ୍ ର ଗୋଟେ ପ୍ରକାରର ହିନ୍ଦୁଇଜିମ୍ ଯଦି ଡେଭଲପ ନ କରିବ, ରାଇଟ୍, ତ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ ନ୍ୟାସନାଲିଜିମ୍ ବି ଏଷ୍ଟାବ୍ଲିଶ ହେଇପାରିବ ନାହିଁ. The unity and masculinity of Hindu must have the Hindu self-standing in the perpetual, sorry, the unity and masculinities of Hindus must not have the Hindu self-standing in the perpetual conflicting presence of other, rather must in order to realize its potential. This is very important. ତ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଜିମ୍ କେମିତି ହେଇପାରିବ, ହିନ୍ଦୁ ଷ୍ଟ୍ରଙ୍ଗ କେମିତି ହେଇପାରିବ, ସବରକର ୱେରେ ହିନ୍ଦୁଇଜିମ୍ଟା ଷ୍ଟ୍ରଙ୍ଗ ହେଇପାରିବ ନା ହିନ୍ଦୁଇଜିମ୍ଟା ଗାନ୍ଧିଆନ ଫିଲୋସଫି ଥ୍ରୁରେ ଷ୍ଟ୍ରଙ୍ଗ ହେଇପାରିବ, ହିନ୍ଦୁଇଜିମ୍ଟା ଗୋଟେ ଏକ୍ସକ୍ଲୁସିଭ କ୍ୟାରେକ୍ଟର ଦ୍ୱାରା ଷ୍ଟ୍ରଙ୍ଗ ହେଇପାରିବ ନା ହିନ୍ଦୁଇଜିମ୍ଟା ଗୋଟେ ଇନକ୍ଲୁସିଭ କ୍ୟାରେକ୍ଟର ଦ୍ୱାରା ଷ୍ଟ୍ରଙ୍ଗ ହେଇପାରିବ. ତ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ରିଭାଇଭାଲିଷ୍ଟ ମାନେ mostly they would accept Gandhi, because for them this unity is possible, or the masculinities or unity of Hindu is possible only when you don't think that the other is your enemy. You don't think that the other is your enemy, rather than if you think that there is something good in other, there is something good in other, there is something bad in other also. What is good in other, I will invoke it, and by invoking goodness from other, then I can realize my potential, and I can I can be developed, I can be better. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank you,
Himanshu
sir.
Sakar. Okay, sir, proceed, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Himanshu Sakar, Mr. Sir. So, like you, like it is really good for everyone, for me or for all the learner to know the discourse of religious in the politics. You began the idea of religious. You began your discussion or began your argument from the evolutions of religious and the politics, and you touch upon the how the Raman Roy, how the concept of Ambedkar, or how the different scholar, different freedom fighter put their idea on the religion politics. You have clearly distinguished the concept of religion of Nehru and Hira, and you also clearly identify the argument of how Modi regime have a different concept of nationalism in the context of religion. So it is really interesting. It is really well articulated, and it is really so much idea to put into the mind of the student. So before we go to question session, so, so let me ask Professor Arun Kumar Patnaik sir is here with us. So let's have a clear comments or like some observations from him. So Professor Arun Patnaik, can you enlighten us about to you, sir? Hello, Professor Arun Kumar Patnaik sir.
Is he there?
Yes, he's here only. Okay, anyway, let's take some question, then we'll come to Arun Patnaik, sir.
Hmm.
Okay, there are two, three prominent questions asked by the students. So let take one by one through which we can answer all the question. So, sir, first question is asked by Pratap Mahananda. He's asking about what about the Machiavellian concept of idea who separated the politics from religion and knew what this as a father of modern political thinker. How do you see that? How do you see the Machiavellian concept of separation of politics from religion?
Hmm.
You get the point, sir?
Yes. Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Yeah, okay. The second question is asked by Aparna Biswas. She's asking about, can India be divided again in the line of religion? Can India be divided again on the line of religion? Or will Indian democracy continue with the problem of religion's fundamentalism?
Okay. Hmm.
You get the point, right?
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
Okay. So, and the next question, like during the Modi government period, right to speak or right to criticize has been curtailing since from his regime, and saying anti-national when we spoke or criticized the government. So how do you see or how do you take on that?
Once again, authorize a प्रश्न.
Yes, he's asking about the Modi government in the Modi government period in the contemporary political
Hmm, hmm,
regime.
hmm.
Like the right to speak, right to freedom, or right to freedom, or right to criticize the government has been curtailing. And saying those who are saying, or
Right
those
to
who
speak. Right to speak.
or right to freedom of expression, or criticize the
Hmm.
government has been curtailing. And saying if somebody is saying, then he's called as anti-national. So how do you see on that?
Hmm.
And fourth question
Yes.
is, fourth question is,
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
is Indian nationalism in the contemporary political scenario?
Hmm.
So for the time being, we have four questions. Let's take the four question, then we'll get the question, then we'll discuss on it. Is that okay, sir?
Hmm, 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 hmm.
Okay, please carry on.
See this, you know, in Europe, this Machiavellian concept of secularism, separation between the state and politics, it is uh, it is very much relevant. Why in Europe actually? It's because the papal supremacy, right? It is because of the papal supremacy it is because of the corrupted religion, Christianity. It become very corrupted, and the supremacy of papal, it created havoc, tension in the subjects, of, in the I mean it creates a havoc in European countries, right? But this separation of politics and religion, it is not, you know, I will not prescribe, and it is also not prescribed in Indian context, because in India we perceive religion, unlike West. In West, religions are seen as a organized form, but in India, religion is something metaphysical in nature also. Right. In India, religion is not a false consciousness. Rather than in India, religion is a metaphysical consciousness. Right. So in India also, you can find a rich, religious prescription, and poor religious practice. Right. So if you read the Upanishad, then you will find the prescription of Hinduism. But if you read the Ambedkar's Hinduism, then you will find the practices of Hinduism. And both these are very important. Not to suggest separation of politics and religion is a mode of secularism to the Indian society. It's because that. Let's come to the practice first. There are different forms of domination in India, right? If religion and politics will be separate, the religion politics intervene କରିପାରିବନି, politics religion intervene କରିପାରିବନି, then how to solve problem, right? And how politics will learn its grammar? Politics ତାର grammar କୋଉଠି ଶିଖିବ, right? So if politics will teach us, if the state will teach the society, then where the state will learn? So it's always ideal, and it's a very ideal suggestion is that you should learn from the society, and after learning from the society, you should teach the society, right? So in that way, I mean, the state should learn from the religion. The state must know the secularization process, the understanding of secularization, and only when the state will know the secularization, the state can teach to the society. The first, second, there are different kinds of domination, and to deal in state cannot be agnostic, right? Seti separation darkar nahi, seti intervention darkar. State needs intervention. So the Machiavellian idea of separation in politics, it is well fit in the West. It is not at all fit in Indian context. Then can India be divided again by the religion? Uh, but why you are thinking so that India is divided, or once again India is divided by the religion, right? Is it because of Modi phenomena, right? So actually, to know this question, to understand this question very clearly, I think you need to understand the Nehruvian secularism and the prevailing secularism today, right? तो नेहरूवियन सेकुलरिज्म बा आमे जोटा लेफ्ट लिबरल सेकुलरिज्म आमे जोटा कहूचो, से सेकुलरिज्म रे बहुत गुडा वीकनेसेस रहितिला, बट मोदी रिजिम रे जो सेकुलरिज्म टा होची, से सेकुलरिज्म रे मोदी हैज टेकन मेनी पॉजिटिव स्टेट, ट्रिपल तलाक को से उठेला. You may think politics that is related with the triple talaq, but Congress एटा जानी थिला जे केवल केवल caste is not or caste is religious neutral, gender is also religious neutral, right? तमे कहि परिबोनी केवल हिंदू धर्मर नारी मान को ऊपर अत्याचार करा जाउची, तेनु हिंदू रिफॉर्म होवा दरकार. What about the Muslim? What about the Christianity? Right? तत्र आमे जेंडर कथा कहूचे, सेतरा आमे केवल हिंदू वुमेन को कथा बुझुचे कि ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ କାଷ୍ଟ କଥା କହୁଛେ ସେତେବେଳେ ଆମେ କେବଳ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ମାନଙ୍କ କଥା ବୁଝୁଛେ, ଅନ୍ୟ ମାନଙ୍କ କଥା ଆମେ କହିବୁନୁ, right? ତେଣୁ caste and gender, these are religion or neutral, religion neutral actually. ତେଣୁ ଏଟା ଆମର ନେହେରୁ ବି ତ ଏଇ ଷ୍ଟେପଟା ନେଇ ପାରିଥାନ୍ତେ ଶାହବାନୁ କେସରେ, କିନ୍ତୁ ନେହେରୁ ଶାହବାନୁ କେସରେ ଏଇ ଷ୍ଟେପଟା ସେ ନେଲେ ନାହିଁ। Why the Congress party failed to take any step on Sahbanu case, right? So if you say that on one hand, if you are saying that Modi represents, Hindu revivalism, right? So there is a re-emergence of religion in India, and BJP government is based on communal politics. On the other hand, you will find that a lot of hypocrisy. So India has opted, communalism, and India did not opted hypocrisy and corruption, and Congress party is full of corruption as well. And in politics, we always, try to blame each other, and the only intention is to catch the power. And the third question is that in the Modi government, right to speak, right to freedom of expression is curtailed, and ଯୋଉମାନେ ବି କହୁଛନ୍ତି ତାକୁ anti national କୁହାଯାଉଛି। But ମୁଁ ତ right to speak କରିପାରୁଛି, I am speaking, right? No sedition charge has done against me, and more to freedom of expression achi. I don't feel, my freedom of expression has been curtailed. So does it mean that I belong to RSS? That you need to think about. And why you think that your freedom of expression is curtailed? Why you think that your right to speak is not there? ମୁଁ ତ ଦେଖୁଛି ଏଇ ମୋଦି ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟରେ ହିଁ ରାଇଟ୍ ଟୁ ସ୍ପିକ୍ ବହୁତ ଅଛି। ମୋଦିକୁ ଲୋକ ଝାପର୍ତ୍ତା ଗାଳି ଗୁଲଜ କରୁଛନ୍ତି, ଆଉ କେତେ ଦରକାର ରାଇଟ୍ ଟୁ ସ୍ପିକ୍। ବଟ୍ only problem is that if you are, failing to distinguishing between Modi and the nation state, then there is a problem. If you think that now Indian nation state is Modi, and I will speak anything that is unconstitutional to Indian nation state, and Modi should not take any step against me. Actually Modi भी सही कथा कहूची कि you can say something against me, but that doesn't mean that you should speak something against the nation state. So there is a small difference between, criticizing Modi and criticizing the nation state. So once you are going against criticizing the nation state, right, जोटारे sedition charge lagi paribo, jadi if you do such kind of work, then sedition charge lagibo. The law will take its own course of action, right? So I think we need to very categorically distinguish between Modi and nation state. Modi is not nation state. Modi is an individual. Nation state is an entity. It is ever permanent. It is, nation state is ours. Modi may not be ours. Modi is the guardian of the nation state. So while criticizing Modi, you should not go beyond, and you should not say something against the nation state. We need to be double conscious. Then what is Indian nationalism? I mean, for nationalism, one can define, a kind of territory having population. Then you should have a psychological sentiments, and then you should have sovereignty, right? तो तेणु आम कहीपर गोटे भूल भी कही जाइली गत क्लास रे से मोर मटेरियल रे भी सेटा लिखा अछि इंडिया इज ए मल्टीनेशनल स्टेट टुडे आई गॉट ए चांस टू रेक्टिफाई इट इंडिया इज नॉट ए मल्टीनेशनल स्टेट it's because the sovereignty power is with the India. It is not with any ethnic nationalism, तेणु आमर जो नेशनलिज्म को दी भाग रे विभक्त कलु सिविक नेशनलिज्म और एथनिक नेशनलिज्म। एथनिक नेशनलिज्म वा एथनिक नेशन स्टेट कहा जाई परिबनी, केवल गोटे एथनिक नेशनलिज्म कहि परिबो, इट्स ए फीलिंग। बट मल्टीनेशनल स्टेट आम जतले कहूचे, इफ इंडिया इज ए मल्टीनेशनल स्टेट, देन वी कैन से दैट ओडिशा इज ए नेशन स्टेट, बेंगल इज ए नेशन स्टेट। But the problem with such kind of understanding is that Odisha has no sovereignty. India has the sovereign power. Odisha is not a sovereign power. Bengal is not a sovereign power. Then what is nationalism actually? Indian nationalism. How to realize Indian nationalism? Indian nationalism can be realized only when only when you will reinterpret, you will introspect your religious tradition. Only when you will realize that we are different in forms, but we belong to one root. जोटा गांधीଙ୍କର अंडरस्टैंडिंग थिला कि ईश्वर एक, Christianity, Islam, ये सब these are different branches, right? So only when you will understand the oneness of different religious category, then only you can find a kind of solid Indian nationalism, right? So you have to realize the deeper essence of our religions. So Antarjami,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
what are the other questions?
So far there is no more question. One there is a question, but it's not exactly a question. It's a somehow observation. So I don't want to take this question because you have already taken two questions of the student. So let it be.
Mhm,
Okay. Let's
mhm,
open to Professor Arun Kumar Mahapatra sir, Patnaik sir. Sorry. So if he can
mhm.
listen us, then he can share his idea or thought with us. That would be more productive for us. Hello, sir. Arun Kumar Patnaik, sir. Are you there?
Yes, yes, sir is there.
Yes, but he's not responding. Can, can somebody call him or like, can we? Hello? Hello, Professor Arun Kumar Patnaik, sir. I don't know. Anyway, let's. So, any comment from Vigneswar Raut? Any thought, any observation, or anything you want to say, you want to speak, you want to share with us? Vigneswar Raut?
Thank you, Antarjami sir. Thank you, Himanshu Shekhar Mishra sir. I just have one point of observation that the relationship between religion and politics is very simple. That you cannot separate your body parts. Body parts. Religion is your heart, and politics is your outer part of body. And religious is the highest human consciousness, and that politics is a servant of people. Thank you, sir.
Okay, okay,
Okay, thank
okay,
you.
okay. Then let
Can
me
I come in?
thank
Can
you,
I
thank
speak
you.
now? Can I speak
Yes,
now?
sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
we are
I
waiting for
didn't know
you.
how to unmute my speaker, so now I discovered.
All right, sir.
See,
Carry on, sir.
what Himanshu, I make a factual mistake. Savan controversy didn't happen during Nehru period. It happened during
In
his
Congress,
grandson's period.
Congress,
No,
Congress
it
period,
happened
yes.
during his grandson's period, not Nehru period.
True, true, true.
That has to be rectified. That Rajiv Gandhi's period. So that is one. Second, so far as Indian secularism is concerned, Himanshu said quite well. It essentially deals with two important features. Is also caste related and also gender related. If he talks about intra-religious domination and tries to try to reform those forms of domination, and then tries to offer an alternative framework of secularism. That is distinctively Indian. And what is common between Western secularism and Indian secularism is like this. Both talk about narrative of reform that deals with structures of power across religious dogmas. So that what Rajiv Bhargava calls inter-religious domination. So secularism is also about inter-religious domination, and that is true for Indian secularism as well as Western secularism. That's where both of them are common. So more often Indian commentators get confused. They think that what is common may not be different. Things between A and B, suppose A and B are having common features, it doesn't mean that A is A and B is B. B remains B, A remains A, despite having common features. So most of us get confused between this. Either we say if they are different, how they is common, If there is common, how are they different? These are all nonsensical questions, irrelevant questions we ask. Because simple common sense tells you that A may be A, B may be B, yet they may be sharing common features. That is critical. What is true for a language is also true for political, ideological formations. That is my second point. And third, I said, if you notice carefully, the constitutional secularism of the kind of thing which Himanshu referred to my paper, and we say certain kind of consensus across religious boards. All religious communities had certain kind of consensus about constitutional secularism. But gradually, politics of secularism weakened that framework. For example, I'll give one thing. If you notice the constitutional provision of safeguarding minority rights was actually heatedly debated in the Constitutional Assembly by all, almost all, by socialists, by Gandhians, by Nehruvians, by Sanghis, by intellectuals, lawyers, all debated that extensively. But finally, Sardar Patel managed to bring a consensus, and he prevailed on them one by one. And Ambedkar prevailed one by one. All of them agreed that all of them, not without an exception, to even the founder of Sangh Parivar, that is Mukherjee. What is his name? Shyam Prasad Mukherjee. Now, all of them said that minority rights are absolute. There can't be any negotiation with minority rights. All of them said. That means they all decided to agree for safeguarding minority rights. But at the same time, they also said if minority rights try to prevent any discussion of intra-religious domination among minority religious communities, then that question. Therefore, but that agreement was not outlined by any, not even Ambedkar, not even Nehru. Though all of them believe that Indian secularism is about curbing, about containing, about restraining intra-religious domination, yet they didn't extend that idea to minority religious communities. It's very tragic that Indian secularism is defined as distinctively different because it talks about intra-religious domination. Otherwise, it is almost same as Western secularism, which talks about inter-religious domination. How state must prevent one religion dominating another religion or another religions. That is a common concern of Western secularism and Indian secularism. But the distinctive feature of Indian secularism is that it tries to talk about caste and gender-based divisions, discriminations practiced within each religious community. That's where Indian secularism failed. It talks about casteism among Hindus, talks about gender ill treatment among Hindus, but refuses to talk about the same thing about Muslims, about Christians, about Sikhs, about Buddhists, about all. Therefore, it talks about minority religious rights, and while it achieved a consensus that minority religious rights are absolute, non-negotiable, that can't be trampled upon, they must be safeguarded, their right to religion must be protected, and the right to worship in public must be safeguarded, and the right to culture must be safeguarded, right to language must be safeguarded. Now, varieties of safeguards must ensue. Therefore, it tried to address the question of prevention of inter-religious domination, yet it failed to extend the idea of intra-religious domination to redefine minority contribution to India's secularism. This is where minority, what BJP calls minoritism, was built in. So BJP is right saying that Indian secularism is in promoting minoritism. In a way, BJP is right. In a way, I do see the point, because that is where exactly Indian secularism failed. It never addressed legally or morally or politically the question of intra-religious domination being practiced among Christians, among Sikhs, among these, among Buddhists, and Jains, among Muslims, and so on and so forth. Thereby, it started to crumble. It became weak over a period of time. 70 years down the line now, its fault lines are terribly exposed. Time has come for Indian secularism to retrieve grounds, extend the same principle to minority religious communities. What you do to Hindus, Hindu religious community must adopt same principle to redefine minorities' contributions to Indian secularism. So only then Indian secularism can come in a full circle. Otherwise, now it is a semicircle and many loose ends, and it can collapse at any point of time because it is really wrongly founded on principles, and is unwilling to extend those principles. But what happened during Modi period is remarkable. Modi at least extended that idea to Islam. So the Islam practices certain kinds of discrimination against its own women. What Nehru talks about intra-religious domination, or Ambedkar talks about intra-religious domination, Modi extends that idea to Islamic communities in India. Nehru, Ambedkar talk about intra-religious domination among Hindus, but they are unwilling to extend the principle to Muslims or Christians. Now, here for the first time, Modi extends that same principle, the secular principle outlined in the constitutional secularism. Modi extends the same principle to reform Muslims among in the fabric of secularism in India. Therefore, in my view, Modi's triple talaq reform, though it's restricted, is not on the dialogue, no discussion, nothing. Therefore, I am slightly critical of it. But the point is, constitutional principle, in terms of constitutional principle, it has applied the same principle that Nehru has applied to redefine Hinduism, to redefine, or Ambedkar applied same principle to redefine Hinduism. Therefore, this Ambedkar-Nehruvian principle of interrogating intra-religious practices are now addressed by Modi, at least in the context of Indian Islam. So I must confess that this is a limited application. It should be applied to Indian Christianity as well. It should apply to Indian Sikhism, Indian Buddhism, and so on and so forth. However, something is better than nothing. So Nehru's idea is actually extended by Modi to redefine New India. In my view, Modi's New India project is a continuation, reaffirmation of what Nehru did and what he could not do. Therefore, in a way, Modi's New India is trying to overcome limitations of Nehru's New India. So, I thank you very much. I hope I was clear to all of you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you,
Yeah.
Professor Arun Patnaik, for your kind words, for your kind thought, for your kind idea to give a clear picture what the idea of religions in the system of politics in the politics in India. From you start from your discourse from the Saravanu case from during the period of Rajiv Gandhi, and you carry forward your discussion to till Modi period. So it's really nice to share your idea. We are glad to listen you, sir. And now the time is come to thank you, both of you. I would like to thank on behalf of Odisha Shirappan University. Thank you so much, Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra, sir, and Professor Arun Kumar Patnaik. To both you are the supervisor and mentor for Dr. Himanshu Shekhar Mishra, and you share your ideas, share your thought to our students, to our learners. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I would
Thank you.
like also thank our technical person Minoti Biswal and Abhinandan Tripathi for your kind support to provide technical support to the student, to the speaker, to the other person to join in the meeting and speak and share their idea, and also to be participate in the online class. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Himanshu Mr. Sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
Thank you,
much.
Antaryami. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Bye.
Patnaik sir. Thank you.
Bye.